Welcome to Athletes to Entrepreneurs, the Alumni Journey. I'm Rob Finkelstein, founder and CEO of Alumni Direct. We've set out to create a platform where alumni could network and connect with each other through their various affinity groups, whether it's colleges, whether it's different organizations like fraternities, sororities, and athletes. But one thing that's really important to us is that there's a major issue today with athletes transitioning out of sports. And this show has been designed to teach and inspire athletes that there is life after sports. And we're really excited today to have with us Keith Hammond on the show. How you doing today, Keith?
I'm well, Rob, and yourself.
I'm doing great. So Keith's background, Keith was a former college football player at Oklahoma State. And then when he graduated, he was in the mental health or the healthcare industry. He also then went on to become basically in the project management world, wide spectrum, and he's got his own company. And we're excited to hear more about his journey and some of the things that he's doing today. So first question for you, Keith, I always make it very simple is tell me about playing sports growing up and how it shaped you, like kind of from youth sports into, say, high school.
Fantastic. Well, thanks, Rob. First of all, thanks for the invitation. Yeah, so as a kid, I always thought that I was never the tallest, I was never the fastest. So I landed on baseball, kind of as my sport of choice, despite always playing football and never really letting a football season pass. And then I realized at a very young age that I couldn't play basketball because well, I think I was probably 14 and 5'9", and I couldn't touch the rim. And in my neighborhood, that was, you were an abomination. So, and I grew up in the east side of Denver, and you're an abomination if you couldn't touch the rim at 5'9". So, especially we had kids dunking at 5'10", 5'11". So I chose to channel a lot of my energies into football. And then in going into high school, under the coaching of Coach Alex Burrow, who was a legend, and feel free to Google him. He played running back for the Chicago Cardinals back in the 50s, and he also ran I believe in the '68 Mexico City Olympics. So super coach, taught me how to run, and it elevated my football game, and I ended up parlaying that into a collegiate career.
That's great. And this one's always a question I ask everybody is like, did you dream of being a professional athlete? And if so, what sport? Because you did mention baseball.
I really never thought I would go to the NFL. I understood my role as a student athlete. I saw the kids that came in and came out of college that went on to the next level, and I realized early. I remember Dr. Joe DeBella, my defensive coordinator, came to me one day and he grabbed me by the face mask and he's like, and my nickname was Hambone, but he used to always call me Bonehead, and he just grabbed me and goes, "You know, Bonehead, you have all the skills in the world. You're fast enough. You're strong enough. You have great instincts and great talent. You just didn't grow up poor enough." And he walked away. And I thought, interesting. And, and looking back, I think, I was a hard science major. I was a biological engineering major. And I would, if I overslept for practice, I would run into coaches later and they go, "Hey, Hammond, hey, did you have lab today?" And I'm like, yeah, yep, that's what I had. And I realized that their world and my world were very different. The fact that I had labs, I had physics lab and chemistry lab and organic chemistry lab, and that was a foreign thing to college football back in the '80s.
Yeah,
And
no, I remember a lot of people talking about, I guess the infamous, they talk about like basket weaving and stuff like that. You guys hear them joking around. So talk a little bit about like once you got to college, were there, and we're both, we were fortunate, we're nice. Our generation might be a little bit different. That's a nice way to say it for the two of us. But
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
like what did the schools back then, and then also from what you know now, from whether it's your kids or just other athletes that you've been around, did they do things to educate the athletes on other things for when there would be life after sports?
No, no, and several of us have, because I go back for the alumni, for and hate to be polarizing, but I go back every year for the Black Alumni Golf Tournament. Um, and we've been doing it for about 30 years. Doesn't make it right, but
Right.
it's just called the Black Alumni, but it's not just Black alumni playing. So, but I go back every year for that, and for the past 20 years, one of the things that has been very well known and stated is, we wish that they had talked to us about how to eat after after sports, when we're no longer burning 6,000 calories a day
Yeah.
working out, when we're no longer at the training table. The fact that just because we're at a buffet doesn't mean we have to eat the entire buffet. Um, and that became really obvious probably my early 30s. I remember one of my who he played fullback for us. I won't name him because he'll probably see this, but I remember he was wearing uh, Velcro golf shoes, and I couldn't understand it, but he kept taking them off. And but then he would every time we saw the cart girls, he was in there getting donuts, and then coming around hole nine, another guy who I won't name because he'll probably see this, one of our receivers who did make it to the NFL, pulls out a bottle of Crown Royal, and that same guy is drinking out of that, and he's still getting donuts. And then they start talking about different pharmaceuticals for blood pressure and pain and arthritis. And I'm looking at these guys, and I'm like, "What are you guys doing? You know, what are we doing to our lives?" And then I didn't even realize it myself, and I was up to 260. I had gained 55 pounds in 10 years, and that's one of the things that's a glaring misstep from collegiate athletics into transition into post athletic life, is they don't teach us how to eat. And actually they shouldn't have to teach us how to eat, but it's something that we just have to understand. Someone needs to be there for life after sports encouragement, and that goes
Yeah.
to
Yeah, that's and I've heard that. I've talked to some other athletes too. I think as an athlete, growing up playing all the time, and then playing at that collegiate level, even high school level for that matter, you have a regimen and the schedule you're following, and if, like you said, you're burning all these calories. I mean, that's definitely one area of physical health, and I know other areas we talk about with just in general some of the like mental health challenges. That athletes face, after they're done with their sport, whether it's, done with it. I mean, I guess theoretically, or it could be high school too, but like college and professional sports. So we at Alumni Direct, that's some of the things we're talking about too, is kind of getting into these athletic departments and seeing if there's ways with a group of people skilled in those different areas that maybe can make an impact on these students and work with them and kind of help them. Like I've talked to some coaches, and I was talking to one coach, and he told his players, listen, less than like 0.1% make it to professional sports. So you have to be looking at the big picture and some of the different things you can do. So one of the other areas you touched on, and obviously with what we're doing as a company, Alumni Direct, is tell me a little bit about, and again, it could be a two-part question. One, when you were at school, were the alumni athletes engaged in, or like where the school is trying to get them to come back and talk to the athletes, not just to play golf, but I mean in general? And then the second part of that question too would be how you see it today as an alumni, and is there people looking for athletes from your school to come back and work with the athletes?
So those are all good points, Rob. And one of the things, so to answer your first question, uh, typically, Oklahoma State was never really a powerhouse until basically, my classes. I'm not saying I was responsible for that, but that was when the Pokes picked up the moniker Tailback U. That's the time when Ray Williams and the Jason Kirksies and the Thurman Thomas and Barry Sanders all came through, and they called them all, so they started calling us Tailback U. They thought it was inevitable, and so I was I was in the older classes of that. So, we for the most part we had guys that came back. They would come back for homecoming and then for Bedlam, and we would, it was nice to see them and talk with them. But from time to time, there would be guys that say, "Hey, I have an insurance agency, in Pahuska, come talk to me and let's discuss it." Or, "Hey, I have this," but no one ever talked about, the mental aspects and letting it go. And it never really hit me, um, to go a little bit to your second question, it never hit me until I was into graduate school, when I started working on a project called the Whistle Stop Syndrome, which is basically exactly what it entails, how the name describes, what happens when the whistle stops to a population of people who spent the majority of their life governed by a whistle, you know, whistle to get up, whistle to run, whistle to stop, whistle to jump, whistle to throw, whistle to catch, whistle to eat, whistle to go to bed. What happens when that whistle's no longer there? And the analogy that I like to use is, we've all been to amusement parks. You've seen the bumper cars with the old bumper cars with the old
Right. Yeah.
Blade Runner thing on the
Yeah.
roof, and it was spark. And then whenever one of the wheels would get broken, and it would just kind of spin around and start hitting things, that's what happens when the whistle stops. And we a group of practitioners back in the early 80s presented that to a higher league, as an option, and saying, "Hey, you're going to have a generation of some bad things that have come down the pipe," and they didn't want to hear it, and it was saddening, and we see what we have now, and I get it. The NFL in particular, they have to protect the shield at all
Yeah.
costs. Uh, the NBA is very fragile, so they don't let anyone in there. Major League Baseball, they've done a great job of reinventing themselves after, three near death experiences, be it steroids or strike
Yeah.
seasons. Um, and there are some other less than high profile leagues that have adopted some parts of it, but for the most part, they're saying, "No, we'll take care of our own." The NFLPA is a good example. They always say, "We'll take care of our own." And I've known, personally, three, prior NFLPA presidents, and every time I share whistle stop syndrome information with them, they're they're basically reduced to tears, and
Yeah. That's
not understand not understanding why this hasn't been elevated and why we haven't. So there are lots of nonprofits out there. The problem with that is there are lots of nonprofits out there,
right.
and um, um, in my introduction, in your great introduction of me, you mentioned that I was in the healthcare industry for 10 years. I was in the mental health industry and as a very low level practitioner, and my father, um, was a psychiatrist in the VA in Denver, and he I would go home and I would, rah, you know, this is what happened. And then they said this, and then they did this. And he would, between cigarette puffs, as all Vietnam and Korean vets did back then, he would say, if someone's afraid of snakes, you probably shouldn't beat the bushes.
Yeah. That's a
And
good point.
I thought about that, and I'm like, huh. And then I was revisited with that statement many years later, and thinking about how a lot of leagues hire their own to deal with issues of mental health with players, and they're not equipped for it. And what happens, for an example, if 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 I came to you and said, okay, Rob, you're hallucinating, and let's work with those hallucinations, let's get you some adequate coping mechanisms. What are you seeing? And you look at me and you say, well, I see your eyes bulging and your skin melting off of your face. And then I get scared and I turn and run.
Yeah, I can see. Yeah, that could be unnerving for sure.
So now we have two broken people
Yeah,
because I didn't effectively deal with what you were going through. And now I've got it too.
yeah. No,
And,
that's certainly a
and
problem. Yeah, and I think that that's so. There's exposing a lot of areas. I mean, mental health being the biggest area, obviously, but even getting into other things like financial literacy and just and even networking, connecting. Like, I don't know how much. Like you said it briefly about like some guys coming back and talking about their insurance agencies, but how much do you see players trying to network and connect either when they're in their sport or even out of the sport? Like it,
I don't think it happens until many years after the fire has been extinguished. Many years after, very few that, I'm somewhat of a unicorn in that I'm one of the few people that walked right off of the field into a profession that I was degreed in. Um, a lot of those guys don't do that. They bounce around, they hang on to the torch, as long as possible. They go to Indianapolis, they go to combine every year. They still have agents on retainer. They're still in the gym working out. They're still me, you know. I was slotted for double knee replacement back when I was 24. So, as an undersized defensive back in the Big Eight, I knew what my destiny was.
right,
Um, so so um so not a whole lot back then. We do a lot now, with exposures, and we do in during the Black Alumni Experience weekend for homecoming. We do a lot of mentoring. We do a lot of corporate mentoring. We do a lot of encouragement and modeling and positioning, in that, you know, just because your degree is X doesn't mean you have to be employed as X. Those are the same skill sets that are required for job B, G, M, and O, you know. Um, and a lot of that is our institutions, our schools' faults as well, because
right,
they've such fine-tuned, and I understand the college experience is a business endeavor.
right. Yeah,
And I mean, I changed majors 4 times,
yeah.
okay, and I still graduated in 5 years. Whereas nowadays, you change more majors 4 times, you'll graduate in maybe 7 years.
Yeah, no, it's a big difference, and yeah, I think you're yeah, and I think with the you bring it like when you're talking about the networking connect or like mentoring and all that, that's geared towards the current students, correct?
Correct. Correct.
And I think the problem that we've seen and what we want to try to help address is that uh, is the alumni as well. So like I think what happens is like jobs, for example, like you can go to a college and a career services and they're geared towards helping the juniors and seniors, and understandable. But they just don't have the bandwidth. What about that person that's 2 years out, 5 years out, and 10 years out? So trying to encourage that the knowledge base and the networking connecting so that alumni can help alumni. So like now again, if you're, like one of the things that we're trying to do is to have an area where an alumni can post a job for a fellow alumni. And I always talk about, I'll tell people like if I'm interviewing 5 people and they all have the same credentials, but one went to Delaware, I'm probably going to hire the Delaware person. And most
Okay.
people, you probably do the same thing for Oklahoma State. So one of the other hot topics that I want to cover real quick with you is give me your thoughts on NIL, both the positives and the negatives.
So positives to NIL. So selfishly,
I've heard this one. It's coming.
where's mine?
Yeah. Yeah, I've
You
heard
know,
that
so,
from a lot of former players, especially our age. They were like, okay, why wasn't it around when I was playing? So,
right now, but uh, I hope I'm not ratting anybody out, but in some circumstances, there were some people at some schools that were being paid
yeah.
quite handsomely. Um, I remember going to another school to play them, and their their visiting team accommodations was an old uh, dormitory that was no longer in program, and the doors were about 4 inches short. And I thought, oh, this is stupid. Why would they?
Right.
Why would they? And so I met someone on their training staff, and I said, and he said, well, and for whatever reason, we had to go in like 2 days early. And he's like, how do you find your accommodations? I said, it's kind of annoying. The doors are like 4 inches short, and I can hear everyone going up and down the hall. I can hear every door open and close. I can hear the laughing. I can hear the farting. I can hear everything. Why is that? And he said, well, that's because that's where they used to how they put their envelopes in. I said, oh, it's just mail run? He goes, oh, no. That used to be the varsity dorm.
Yeah.
And that's where they would walk through on Saturday nights and push the envelopes through.
Right.
And they had, basically, alumni uh, would go walk the varsity dorms, after games
Yeah.
and push things through.
Yeah.
And
You hear it. Yeah. I mean, I've heard a lot of stories, and you're right. I guess that would be the earlier version of NIL, or I guess
right,
the illegal version, so to speak, versus what it
right,
is today.
right. And then today I think it's I'm torn. I'm torn between good for them
Right.
and horrible for the sport. So, there's a lot of your listeners that probably won't like this or agree with it, but I think Sports Center killed athleticism. I think Sports Center killed the camaraderie. They killed the work ethic. They, you know, they wanted to go for the sanctimonious camera shot, blow up hit. They wanted to watch a baseball game. Watch how many of these younger players needlessly die for balls
Yeah.
because it's all to make Sports Center.
Right. Yeah.
So what's happened is sportsmanship has gone out the window, and sportsmanship has gone out the window because everyone's looking for that posterized, you know, proud as a peacock shot
Yeah.
when they should focus on camaraderie, discipline, sportsmanship, and teamsmanship. That's what should be focused on, and that's been lost on a generation.
Yeah, I've heard that a lot, and you're right. I think, whether it's like you said, that's not really NIL, I guess, in a sense, but still, it's NIL has the same ramifications too, because like whereas before, maybe to your point, you're playing as a team, you're going to win, and now
Right,
I guess with
right,
the portals and different things, it kind of I don't know, it kind of washes out. So the other thing that a couple people have brought up too, from like a financial literacy standpoint, is just that, and I always say this, it's not just young athletes, because really it's young people in general, but just all of a sudden you're starting to see, say, like a windfall of money, and what, you do have to pay taxes, and you got to do different things. And so hopefully, and changes are on the horizon, where there is that education out there to better help these athletes understand what they can do, what not to do, and giving them advice versus just a lot of people, I guess, still call it the kind of the wild, wild west, so to speak.
yeah, I agree, and it's unfortunate. And between the financial literacy and emotional intelligence, we've got a giant chasm. I mean, to the young athletes, I'm not mad at you. Get yours, by all means, especially because understand that this isn't forever. I hope you have um, investment coaches and mentors that are not soul crushing leeches. I really hope that you find your way. I'm reminded of a speech that Shaquille O'Neal gave once at a conference that I was a participant in, and he talked about receiving his signing bonus from the Orlando Magic, and I believe at the time it was $5 million or whatever, and he went back to New Orleans and he rounded up 6 of his buddies and hired a limo to drive them to Vegas, and they spent a week in Vegas. He was basically giving out, $100,000 a day to guys to go have a good time, to do whatever. Even the limo driver got him a room and was paying for everything.
Wow.
And when he was down to, I think it was $10,000, he said, "Okay, let's go home." And they headed home, and he called his agent. He said, "Okay, when's my next check?" And the agent said, "When you report to camp in April." And
Wow.
so so he had to go to work at a buddy's seafood restaurant to, well, in the meantime, he had purchased a house for his parents and that whole thing. So
Right.
he had to go to work at a restaurant for a couple months to be able to pay the insurance on that house that he just bought his parents. And that's how Shaq's po' boy was developed. Was he kept piling shrimp and lettuce on these two big buns with a little burger, and he kept going.
Yeah.
And so that's the level of course that's actually a happy ending, because he
Sure.
then made hundreds of millions of dollars.
Yeah.
But at the same time, for every one Shack, there's 2,000 guys out there
Yeah.
who are going to get these bonus checks, but also it kind of threatens the sportsmanship,
Right.
and the team camaraderie. You know, when quarterback, you know, uh, Bosworth has an NIL for Red Lobster, and I'm a receiver at the other end of his 30 touchdown passes,
Right.
and I'm not getting a peep.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know,
I could see that being definitely being an issue. Well, let's kind of fast forward. So, talk about your transition out of sports.
absolutely. So transitioning out was like everyone, my last game I bawled like a baby, uh, and it wasn't that I was going to miss the game as much as I was going to miss the locker room. you
Yeah.
know, I realized that, I can always go outside and throw a football around or run through a wall or go into a weight room or do whatever I need to do. But I would never be in a locker room with, 135 guys again. Like I said, I knew that I would never go beyond. So at the first, I tried to hang on to some levels. I played in the USFL for half a season until that strike came. Uh, and it was like, why do I keep doing this? Why do I keep doing this? And then I was called by a friend of mine who was playing with the Colorado Panthers. Oh, sorry, Colorado Cougars, and which was a semi-pro team. And I'm like, why am I doing this? Why am I doing this? And then played with them for a year, and then I played for 2 years in the USFTL, which is the United
Wow.
States Flag and Touch Football League, and played for the Colorado Steelers, and we did pretty good. We had um, a number of former NFL guys. So when I say that I walked peacefully into the light, I really didn't. I was kind of I kept a toe back into the sport. And
You dabbled in it.
I dabbled in it, but at the same time, I was working as a professional clinician and going to graduate school and that whole thing. And then eventually, once I transitioned from healthcare into construction project management, I started realizing what it was all about, and it was all about that teammanship and that camaraderie and that bringing people together and that synergy, and and I started taking skills that I learned uh, back in football of sitting around with linemen and receivers and defensive backs and quarterbacks, and us all talking the same language. And we'd even have coaches with us and graduate assistants, and we'd all just be talking and having a good time and talking about something completely away from football. And I thought, you know what, that transitions to this.
Yeah.
And I remember starting a bowling league while building on the staff of Lambeau Field, doing the renovation there. And some of the companies I brought together, um, it makes me kind of laugh because these are companies that would never, I mean, drywallers and painters never talk civilly to one another. That's like tin knockers and ironworkers, get out of my way, and and I would bring those guys together. And then I started, golf leagues, and we even did a soccer. I can't play soccer, but I even we've started an indoor soccer tournament team, where we had guys from all over the place, and then just learning from that. And so in my, you know, following 22 years of construction project management, I've been able to do this on every project I've touched, whether it be Lambeau Field, Arrowhead Stadium, Yankees, Virginia Tech, North Carolina State, most recently SoFi Stadium in LA. I've been able to do certain now SoFi was a little bit different because everyone, Los Angeles is an anomaly. It's not like everyone lives right there. They live everywhere from Norwalk to you know, to Bakersfield, to Long Beach, to Malibu. So people are 20, 30, 40, 50 miles away from each other. So it was almost impossible to do any type of cohesive activity together.
Right.
But what we did formulate a thing that we started doing that I called, the monthly chop up. And it was it was every third Thursday, and I would I'd have 20, 30 engineers, project managers meet me at either a cigar lounge or whiskey bar or whatever, and we would just as the name calls it for it, chop it up, and I would tell them, no questions are out. And as the owner's rep, you know, they saw me in a different light. So it was always kind of neat to field their questions. Whatever you have to say. Let's just have a drink, have a good time. Um, and I've been off that project now for 2 years, and I still get texts and emails. When's the next chop up? I miss our chop ups, and I brought people together from uh, the city mayor, the city manager, city attorney, uh, project engineers, project managers, painters, ironworkers, inspectors, and we would all come together,
Yeah.
lots of introductions, and that's what a team is all about. And
Yeah.
that's what successful transition from an athletic background looks like when you get into the corporate world. And we all have it,
Yeah.
and it's just a matter of tapping into it.
Yeah, no, I mean that's great because obviously, like you said, all your whole life you're growing up, you're playing on teams, and it's to utilize that same mentality in the real world, so to speak, is great. So give some quick advice in like a few words, like because you were talking before, you mentioned a few to me, like what people should be looking to do, as they transition out of sports, and just I think I forgot what the ones you said, but go through that again.
Sure. One of the main things I would encourage everyone to look at is look at their strong points, look at their ability to formulate teams, and then look at where they have the best support network. Look at your strengths. If your strengths are analytical, then you can go into an analytical field. If your strengths are more problem solving, or you come to a cohesive team decision, then look for that environment. But and don't force it. Don't force yourself. Don't force that round peg into a square hole. Uh, Things will come. Also, don't hang on past your grip strength. You know, when it's done, you need to formulate a plan. You need to develop a network of like-minded individuals. And people who are forward thinking and forward facing and looking to better themselves and transition up. I have friends to this day in Denver, Colorado, right now, that I can go to their house and I guarantee you they'll put in a tape from a high school football game in 1983.
Hmm.
I guarantee you.
If they still have the VCR, right?
I bet they probably transferred it to DVD. But you're right. You're right.
Yeah, no,
They probably
it's
transferred it.
true.
But
It's
but
true.
I but but I guarantee you, there's probably 3 or 4 guys that, and I get friends all the time that call me, hey, are you going to go by to visit him while you're in town? And it's like, I just can't. You know, you've got to find people that help you think forward and think uh progressively and not drag you back. Um and that's my biggest advice is, it's great to learn from the past, but you don't have to learn in the past.
I mean, those are, as we always say, those are great nuggets. So tell people, where they can find you and kind of a little more about your business and again, whether it's your Twitter and your LinkedIn, your Facebook, all that kind of good stuff, your website.
Sure. So it was probably a few years ago. I met a very good gentleman by the name of Jim Sedurna, who turned into a fantastic mentor. Oh, one of my greatest pieces of advice that anyone could ever given me is, do not shy away from your civic duties and joining local boards. Okay, when you have a chance, even if it's outside of your swim lane. One of my biggest catapults in my career was joining my local county hospital board. So that opened my eyes to just a considerable number of things. The next thing I'd like to encourage everyone to do is read. Read everything, whether it's Jack Welch or Admiral McCraven or McCutcheon. Read. So I say that to say, so very good mentor, Jim Sedurna, encouraged me to start my own company, stating that, someone with my resume and my experiences, that I had a lot more to offer and I could offer it to multiple projects and companies rather than being dedicated to one. And so I've done that, and I've been very successful. It's taken hold. Once again, I'm at hammondsolutions.com. LinkedIn, you can go to Keith Hammond, or you can go look at Hammond Solutions LLC, and it'll probably bring you to me. You'll see a couple companies on there that I currently do some bidding for. Lanier United, JM Longyear, and Petaway Management Group. Let's see. Yeah, so that's kind of what I'm doing right now. It's keeping me just busy enough. We still have one kid at home. Our youngest is 17, who, as most 17 female daughters of, the overactive, overbearing father. She's happy when I'm on the road because I've never been home she's like, you've never been home for the other 3. Why are you home now? And
Yeah.
so that kind of thing. But all in all, it's all good. Everyone's healthy. Uh, and I'll give it a little bit of a parenting advice. While it's always good to offer direction, because as athletes, I won't say former athletes, as athletes, we're ingrained with root cause analysis and corrective measures. So when we see something break down, why did it break down? Here's how you fix it. In child rearing and parenting, not everything needs to be fixed. Okay. Sometimes they just are. And there are opportunities to parent, opportunities to grow, and opportunities to live by. And I would just encourage everyone to save you a lot of headaches if you try not to correct all of your children's behaviors. So
That is all great advice, and we really appreciate all your time today. You could find us alumnidirect.com. You can follow us on LinkedIn and Facebook and Twitter, and follow the show. Go to our YouTube channel, and we're out on all the different podcast networks. And we really want to help make an impact in this athletes transitioning out of sports and helping them out. So again, thank you so much, Keith. We appreciate your time.
thanks, Rob. Anytime, and good luck.
Thank you.